All right, welcome to another episode of Seeds of Music. I'm your host, Kyle Williams, and this is the #1 web show where aspiring independent artists, musicians, and producers can learn right now how to gain wider exposure, grow a strong base of raving fans, and make a living doing what they love. On today's show, we have Blake Morgan, who is a musician, producer, and owner of ECR Music Group in New York. And he's been getting a lot of attention in the media recently because of an email exchange between him and the co-founder of Pandora, Tim Westergren. Tim Westergren had sent an email out to many of the artists that were featured on Pandora in order to garner support for a congressional bill called the Internet Radio Fairness Act. And the issue here is that embedded within that was the act of cutting artists' royalties. And so obviously this angered a lot of artists, and Blake responded back in an email, and it started this huge discussion over the validity or the fairness of compensation for artists by streaming services, particularly Pandora. So we're going to talk with Blake about that and what using Pandora is going to mean for you as an artist. And also on top of that, really important, two things that you need to be doing to be heard above the noise in the current music industry. So stay tuned and find out. All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Seeds of Music. On this episode today, we have Blake Morgan. Really exciting because Blake is not only an independent artist, but he also produces and owns his own record label called ECR Music Group. Thanks for coming on the show, Blake.
Thanks for having me.
So the first thing I wanted to tackle is, this this kind of like Pandora issue that's going on lately. Can you give us a little bit of a background for people who don't know exactly what's going on?
Well, Pandora is I think thought of as, if maybe they really are, but they're the largest internet radio company in the country, and I really like Pandora. I think a lot of musicians do and have, but increasingly over the last couple of years, their behavior and their statements have been really confrontational when it comes to artists and artists' rights and artists' royalties. This involved me. I, like a lot of artists, a couple months ago, got an email from Tim Westergren, who's the founder and the CSO of Pandora, asking us to sign on to a petition that would be then brought to Congress to sort of as an endorsement of Pandora. But what they didn't say anywhere in the letter, and what they didn't say anywhere in the explanation of the letter, is that these signatures that they were getting from artists would be folded together and brought to Congress to help lobby for a bill that actually specifically lowers our royalties and the amount of money that Pandora actually has to pay. So, in fact, Pink Floyd just a couple weeks ago came out and wrote a really beautiful op-ed.
Oh, yeah. So today, I shared that. Yeah, I saw that.
Talking about the same thing. It's one thing to stand for something and then say, hey, can you help us out? It's another thing to hope that you can dupe artists who aren't paying attention or who aren't, deep into the royalty issues or the machinations of Congress. To dupe them into signing something that's specifically that's against their interests. So I wrote back to Mr. Westergren and just said something to that effect, and said, look, if you're going to say you're artist friendly, it's really difficult. I'd love to believe this, but it's really difficult to swallow when this is your position. And so an email exchange of his and mine went public in the Huffington Post, and that sort of added fuel to the fire that's been going on for several months. Other artists like David Lowery and then Pink Floyd have also spoken out about this. So it's not just me. But that's kind of what I think started this latest chapter, which is just sort of calling out the hypocrisy of these emails that they were sending out.
Okay. And is this just limited to Pandora, or is there kind of like unfair compensation going on in general with the streaming or radio services for music?
Well, I don't know if you've heard, but the music industry has been unfair.
Yeah.
So yes, artists being treated unfairly. This is not anything new. This is
Yeah.
decades, to be
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
However, this is a unique situation, and you really have to ask yourself, um, how clear cut is it, this behavior that Pandora has been displaying, when for the first time, at least that I or anyone I know can remember, you've managed to unite. There's sort of Pandora and Clear Channel on the one side, and on the other side, you've got artists, their record labels. So that's an incredible feat right there. You've got performance rights organizations like BMI, ASCAP.
Yeah.
You've got organizations like the RIAA, and I mean, these are natural enemies to some degree.
Yeah.
And basically, the entire music world is united in saying this is patently wrong. I mean, this is lots of times we don't know right from wrong, but sometimes we do, and this is one of those times. So Pandora is unique in their behavior and in being out front in lobbying for a bill that was called the Internet Radio Fairness Act. There are a lot of other people out there a lot of other companies out there that certainly have been far from artist friendly. But to be honest, certainly in recent years and really just even in recent months, this has been on a different level with Pandora.
So, but you're basically, would you agree that there's more power now in the artist's hands to unite and to exact change just through being able to connect with each other and have their voice heard?
I think that there have been sort of two factors that have conspired against artists in this fight, and I think that there are two factors that have recently changed dramatically. The first factor is a fundamental lack of understanding of how your own royalties even work. Mm-hmm. I happen to be an artist who has found this interesting for years, and so I learned about it. Plus, you're right, I also own a music company myself. A music company, by the way, where 100% of our artists and 100% of our labels own 100% of their music. So it's a very different kind of music company. But I had to learn about this stuff in order to run the company, and also just to be the kind of artist I wanted to be engaged. Yeah. But a lot of artists choose not to be, and a lot of artists just aren't taught to be. So the first factor has been ignorance. How do my royalties even work? Am I really getting what I deserve? So I think that those artists were the artists that Pandora was looking for with this letter. That's the first factor. And the second factor is I think that informed artists have been afraid to step forward and to speak out. And it didn't feel that way so much for me, but I've had a lot of people say to me, like, wow, thanks for being brave in speaking out, and I appreciate that, although I've got to say, a rock musician bucking authority, what a shock. So, but I do think that it scared a lot of really smart artists into silence, and it was very moving for me when Pink Floyd stepped out and reunited. Oh, yeah. I mean, of all bands, to reunite and to write such a beautiful article in USA Today, it just felt to me, and I think to a lot of other people, like the cavalry had arrived.
Oh yeah, yeah. That would give so much inspiration if, like, one of the greatest rock bands just came forward and kind of was saying the same thing and kind of give voice to people who were definitely afraid for one reason or another.
And there are people out there who are going to say, well, what do I care if Pink Floyd makes a little less money? They're doing fine, clearly. But I think that, again, that's a third factor, really, that's changed also, which is, the understanding that recording artists and music as a profession is really almost like any profession, where you have a few people at the top who might be multimillionaires, but the vast majority of recording artists aren't. They're middle-class recording artists who maybe are able to support themselves without tending bar or waiting tables. There are recording artists who do that, and a lot of recording artists who you might have even heard of who still do that. And that's honorable and brave. But there are a lot of recording artists who support their families and have mortgages and live off their music because of this. So I think that that's also something that's changed for some non-superstars to step forward and say, hey, this really affects my bottom line. Yeah,
because it seems more, people kind of adopt this mentality of, of the way they look at purchasing music and the way they view just music as commerce from this perspective of the richest of the rich artists, you know,
Right.
like, oh, who cares, you know, but they don't realize that there is that
Right,
vast
yeah.
majority.
I think going back to the Metallica Napster thing, I think that, you know, I think that a lot of people had that position with Metallica. Like,
Hmm.
you guys have sold 200 trillion records. What do I care if you're losing a little money?
Yeah.
You know. But I think that that's something also that's changed, which is on that list of factions that have united over this.
Hmm.
You know, one of those really important factions is our audience.
Yeah.
It's like musicians and our audience have been somewhat at loggerheads the last years with file sharing. And what's been so amazing over this is our audience, you know, stepping in and saying, "Hey, wait a second, these guys should be paid. This is
Yeah.
ridiculous."
Yeah.
So,
Do you think that there's any, like, you've gotten a lot of, no doubtly have gotten a lot of exposure from Pandora and a lot of promotion from it. I mean, has there been any other promotion?
Have I?
You,
have I? I mean, really?
I mean,
Everyone always says this, like, "Oh, this is so good for you because you're getting so much promotion." Really?
have you been able to see numbers that translate from it?
Not personally.
Really?
Which isn't to say that other people, you know, don't enjoy positive fallout from Pandora. Again, you know, I really liked Pandora, and most musicians. I mean, I remember when they started out, I thought the Music Genome Project was really interesting, and I think that that's another thing that's made this different for a lot of artists, which is that it's not like, this isn't some cartoon battle. Pandora's not an evil empire. I'm not a plucky hero. You know, it's more much. This is real life. And I
Yeah.
think that more than anything, there's just been a real sense of kind of heartbreak and disappointment over Pandora, rather than mouth frothing and, you know,
Oh,
you know,
yeah, picking up
that's
the
what-
burning sword and the shield.
yeah, it's not like that, but it's just been really awful because I think we did think that they were an asset, and but you know, that is one thing that everyone always says. It's like, oh well, it's okay if everyone's file sharing your music, or if your music's out there and you don't get paid for it because it's all promotion.
Yeah.
You know, okay, but you know, promotion for what? Leading towards
Promotion
what?
needs to transform into sales in order for you to be able to continue doing what you do. But
And then some people on top of that say, like, well, you know, you should get out there and be playing. Playing is where the money is. Well, any touring musician is going to tell you that playing is not where the money is, unless
Yeah.
you're at the Paul McCartney, Pink Floyd level. Okay,
Yeah.
so, and by the way, we're all doing that too.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're going, oh right, God, I forgot, I'm supposed to be playing out. You know,
Yeah.
it's like we're doing that. We're doing everything.
So
you know?
there is kind of this just like purveying ignorance, you know, about a lot of different things. But
Yeah,
what,
and then that also still mixes in with the well, you know, you get to play music. So what do you complain about? It's you know, there's still a money for nothing and your chicks for free attitude, which again I can understand, but I think that really is something that's changing, which is, you know, this isn't a hobby, this isn't a game, this isn't easy, this isn't fun all the time. It's fun a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But that's because you're chasing your dream, which is
Yeah.
what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And music is my profession. It's not
Yeah.
a game, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think for some people there might be this element of like they wish they could be pursuing their dream, so you know they kind of take this attitude like, well, you're doing something, you know, they compare like what your profession to their profession might be working in a corporate office and they hate their life or whatever, and so they kind of, there's that kind of element there. But is there something that you would recommend for other, you know, artists or musicians to pursue for promoting their music and getting it out there, other than Pandora or streaming services? I mean, what has worked for you?
I think the only thing that really works right now, there are two things. I'll start with the second thing. The second thing is I really feel you have to do everything. You just have to do everything. There's no silver bullet. There's no one thing that's going to, you know, you're not going to go from nobody hearing you to being a big star or having an audience for your music,
Yeah.
you know, just magically.
Yeah.
So it's a job, you know. I think if, you know, anyone who is looking to build a career or build a life,
Wake up in the morning early.
if the advice was, I think you should go down to the nearest, you know, 7-Eleven or deli or something, and I think you should buy a lottery ticket. that's a good plan. You'd think that they were crazy. So, as a professional musician and as a recording artist and as a songwriter and a performer, the thing that's worked for me is doing everything I can think of for as long as I can possibly do it. And there's a great line in at the beginning of Citizen Kane, where just after his characters bought his newspaper, and this guy who's in the newspaper business says, what are you doing? This is no way to run a newspaper. And Orson Welles says, I have no idea how to run a newspaper. I just try everything I can think of. And the people I notice that try everything that they can think of do better. So that's the second thing. And the first thing is, it is really, in fact, about the music that you write and and make. And I think that in what's happened in music is distribution has become available to everybody, and the magical interweb is available to everybody.
Yeah.
So everybody thinks that they're equal, but they're not. And the old challenge used to be, nobody's ever heard of me, I've got to get a record deal. Now the challenge is, there are 15, 16 million songs online. And only 1 million of those songs ever sell one copy in any given year. Okay? So how do you get above the white noise?
Yeah.
How do you get noticed?
Yeah.
And, the best way is to make killer stuff.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to do. That's what the artists I work with are trying to do.
Okay.
And I actually don't think that's what everybody is trying to do. I think that they're thinking, okay, I'll make a song, and then I've got to put my strategy in place with my Kickstarter and my DIY skills and this newsletter I wrote. It's like, at the end of the day, we're supposed to make music and then hope to find a way to find an audience for it so that it'll resonate. But it does start with the music, and that's like 95% of the deal.
So not getting lost in... well,
people forget about that part.
Yeah. They get lost. But what you see, I think that artists, they see that they have so much power to get the stuff out there, to learn. There's so much information out there to learn how to do it, that they forget that the core of it really relies on having music that's unique to you, unique to your voice, so that you're going to connect with someone out there and just be authentic. Otherwise, no one's going to listen to it because there's so many other unauthentic songs that are out there kind of clouding.
Right. And that's actually really important, what you just said, which is, I think a lot of people put the strategy before the work itself. And so that is what wins the day. Authenticity wins the day. Intimacy wins the day. And it's much better to try to win or lose as who you are than to think, well, now, if I do this, if I wear these clothes, if you try to outguess, the audience, it rarely, if ever, works.
Yeah.
So it's much better to really just, to live or die as who you are.
Yeah.
And then in a Darwinian way, hope that there are enough people out there who will sort of gravitate towards it.
And then from that strong foundation, then that's when you bring in all the other, like you were said, like try to do as many things as you can. Well, you start off with that foundation, and then that's when you're going to look at, Kickstarters and social media and websites and newsletters in order to make that work. So that's why it's, like you said, it's hard. It's not easy because you have so much to do and so much to learn. Exactly.
Yep.
And what has been your biggest struggle in this whole process? You're doing a lot. It's one thing. Okay, when I think about being an artist and making music and performing, that seems like a daunting task. But you've done so much. You have a record label, you've done production, you've put out albums. What's your biggest struggle with that?
The biggest challenge is juggling those three parts of my musical life. Is running our company. I'm in the middle of producing and recording 4 records. I just finished my record. It comes out July 30th. So
what's it called?
My new record's coming out July 30th. It's called Diamonds in the Dark.
Okay.
So I'm in promotion mode and pre-launch mode for the new record.
Okay.
And that's a real challenge for me, to be a full-time recording engineer and producer and a full-time recording artist and a full-time, label owner and president.
Yeah.
But the thing is what I've found, at least for me, and everybody is different, is it's far less daunting than the alternative, which was I had a huge record deal years and years ago and really watched my record, really almost get destroyed. And the experience was really painful for me. And it was after I fought to get out of my deal that
it was like a 7-album deal, and
and it was after that, I was really decimated after that, having sort of had to walk away from what I had felt was my dream.
Yeah.
And it took me a couple years to kind of put the pieces back together, and that's when I started ECR. So I have a perspective, which is I've done it the other way. Most artists, and at least I was certainly in this category, it's like I want to wake up, I want to work on my craft, I want to be an artist, I want to make my music, I want to have other people handle the rest of the stuff. It's going to be great.
And drink my tea,
Totally. Totally. And or I want to practice all day. I want to work. I want to gig. I want to do all that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, I was forced into a different methodology, which actually was great timing because it's right around the time that the world really changed, and where that's kind of what really every artist has to do. In some way, it's what every artist always had to do, but it's really what you have to do now in the modern music world. And so that's the biggest challenge, which is, and I get asked that, like, well, doesn't being the label owner take time away from being the artist, and vice versa, and the producer? And the answer is yes, it does. It absolutely does. But it doesn't take as much time away as other people coming in and ruining your stuff.
Oh, yeah.
To fix it. And so I've become a much better musician now that I have these different facets to my career. I'm a much better, label owner because I'm an artist on my own label.
Yeah.
When I talk to the artists that we've signed and I say, this is what I would do, it really holds a different weight because I'm on the label. There used to be like this old, terrible TV commercial of this guy who was advertised. It was for the hair club for men. He was a guy named Cy Sperling, and he used to say, I'm not just the president of the club, I'm also a client. And so I sort of feel like that too. It's like, because I'm an artist on the label, I think the company means something.
There's more trust. There's more trust within the company, and people look at they'll immediately view that record label as, wow, that's something I would want to support because I believe in the people that work in it. I believe in its overall message. But real quick, I have the last question for you. Is a little fun question. What was your favorite album, and what would your life be like if it never existed?
Well, anytime I get asked this question, I have to sort of divide it, because there's as musicians, and certainly in my case, I feel like you are what you eat, and half of everything I've ever eaten is the Beatles. So it's like if you were to ask me, like, what are your top 10 records? I'd have to sort of just set the Beatles aside because there's a chance that they would not just dominate the chart, they would be the chart.
Yeah.
But, and there's a lot of music outside of the Beatles, of course, that I love that has changed and shaped my life. But when I get asked that question point blank, I usually, if not always, say Revolver is my favorite record. Okay. And what my life would be like without that record, I shudder to think. I wouldn't recognize it. I don't even know. So.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, I pretty much figured if if it was a Beatles album, because I was reading a little bit in your bio that you're really influenced by it when your mom introduced you to Meet the Beatles.
Yes. That's right.
So I figured, it's going to be a Beatles album, and there would be no Blake Morgan as we know it if it didn't exist. I
mean, I remember as a kid, I listened to "She Loves You" for like a month. Like, I don't think I listened to another song, so that's not even on Revolver. But Revolver is always a good one to say. So.
Okay, awesome. Well, Blake, thanks again for coming on the show. I mean, it's been really awesome to speak with someone who's in this unique position where you've had success in all these different facets, and you're the artist, and you're in it to for the music. I mean, that's your foundation. It's not too much of the whole marketing game.
Thank you for that. That's very sweet. And but there are very few musicians who don't feel the same way. Mm-hmm. Most musicians feel that way. So.
All right. Well, excellent. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
See you later. All right. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Seeds of Music. We had Blake Morgan on the show today. Make sure to check out his links below. His album is already available on iTunes, but it will be released everywhere else, online and offline, on July 30th. If you haven't yet, sign up for the Seeds of Music email newsletter. This is the best way to stay in touch with everything that's going on with the site, but also you'll make sure that you never miss an interview. If you're watching from YouTube and you're subscribe to the YouTube channel, that's not the best way to stay in touch. Just make sure you head over to seedsofmusic.net and sign up for the official newsletter there instead. Also, if you feel like you've gotten something of value from this interview, make sure to like it and share it with everyone you know, because maybe they'll be able to benefit from it. And lastly, comment on the video. What was like the greatest thing that you learned from this interview? Was it that you got to kind of watch out for streaming services, or streaming services might not be the best way for you to promote yourself? Or is it the two tricks on, or the two key qualities, I'd say, that you would need to be doing to be heard above the noise? Did you really benefit from those, and how you actually apply those? I mean, will you go on to actually do those things and see results? Also, just send me an email at kyle.seedsofmusic@gmail.com and let me know who you would like to see interviewed and what subjects you would like to hear in the next interview. So until then, hope to hear from you.